just pulled up to the theater to see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This is one of my most anticipated movies of the year, but more importantly, my take on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is the hottest take on my entire YouTube channel that I've received the most crap for, because I wasn't crazy about that movie and have it very low in my MCU rankings. So I really hope I have different feelings about this movie, and I'm sure a bunch of you hope that I have different feelings about this movie. So I'm gonna go watch it, and then I'll let you know what I thought about it. So I'm back from watching Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and the question comes to mind. Is this a repeat of Volume 2, where I'm left disappointed and fighting with a bunch of you in the comment section for 5 years? Well, unfortunately, it looks like we're not going to be fighting in the comment section another 5 years. This is possibly the best MCU film since Endgame. So let's get started talking about the good. And simply put, this movie delivered everything that I want from a Guardians of the Galaxy film. From the very beginning, we know what our villain wants and what our heroes are trying to accomplish. The story is fairly straightforward, and that gives plenty of room in the runtime for lots of character moments. And as this is the final film in a trilogy, what it's trying to do is close out each of their character arcs. And what Gunn wisely did was dive into what caused each of our Guardians to join the Guardians of the Galaxy. What brought them together? And it was their brokenness. They're all these orphans without a home, and they found family in each other. And then what this movie does is it dives into that brokenness, that loneliness, and tries to kind of uproot it, find what's at the core of it, and so you can actually progress the characters forward. Each of them has something that's missing and something that they're running from.
I'm done running.
And this movie makes them embrace all of that. Great character arcs are all about having characters make choices that are good or bad, but that move them forward as a character. And this movie has a bunch of moments like that. And because we spent so much time with these characters, understanding who they are and why they are the way that they are, when you get to those final moments, those final choices, it's so satisfying because it feels earned. All throughout the movie, there's these little moments, these little revelations about our characters that reframe something about them. So you see them in a new light, but not in a way that feels cheap. It feels like we learned something new that puts all of these past choices in a new context. There were clues all along the way as to what was driving them, or what was missing, or what they could be. And finally in this film, it's kind of revealed. And they take these steps forward, and you see all the additional layers to who they are. And for that reason, it feels like a proper bookend to this trilogy, this 9-year journey that we've been on with these characters, because they're introduced at one point in time in their life, and then they grow and change all along the way, and they find that those final moments, those final revelations, those final choices for the characters to make, that it feels complete, and thus a satisfying conclusion.
I liked it.
And of our 3 Guardians films, this one probably has the strongest villain. I don't think he's a great villain still, because the characterization is a little bit weak, but when it comes to him as a villain, the threat that he poses, like he's a truly sick character, that he knows what he wants, and he does not care who suffers in pursuit of his objective. And there's so many things that he does that are just disturbing, gut-wrenching, and he has absolutely no remorse. There's no effort here to make him sympathetic or anything like that. He's just this twisted character. And because of that, you desperately want to see him defeated. You want to see him and all of his accomplices suffer, and you want our Guardians to be able to free anyone from his clutches. And because of that, it sets up a series of big victories all throughout the film. To that point, This movie has huge emotions. It has a full range of emotions in this film. At the center of the story is Rocket and his backstory, and it is heartbreaking. And I'll comment more on that in the mixed section. I'll go into not more detail specifically, but about more things you need to know about that. But it is just gut-wrenching what they do with Rocket, trying to help you understand where he's coming from, but in the process also making it clear just how sick this villain is. But it's not just a heartbreaking movie, it's also a very victorious film. Because when you set up like such dire stakes and a villain you hate so much, you can feel the moments of victory. Because it's so character-based, you have all sorts of moments where characters make choices that feel earned, but are so impactful as they happen. Because you are closing out all of these character arcs, there's all these little moments that you're not really expecting, because you're starting to realize just how much these characters mean to each other, how much they've actually grown and changed. You're seeing kind of them in more vulnerable moments.
Maybe if you open yourself up to it, there's a possibility.
I don't think so, Quinn.
Quill.
Where you have characters that have been pretty hardened, several of them pretty hardened, so you don't get below the surface. This movie challenges them in a way so you get below the surface a little bit more and get more vulnerable moments with the most hardened of the Guardians. And because of that, you feel so many different things. Tears of sadness, tears of joy, all of it. And that's cool. And you like so many great character moments where you realize at times they push each other too far and they hurt each other's feelings and they feel bad about it because they're actually a family. And I appreciated all of that so much. In particular, another area where I was very critical of Guardians Volume 2 is the relationship between Drax and Mantis, because it was the banter was negative in just one direction, Drax talking down to her. And that's very much evened out here. And so one of the standouts of this film, as well as the holiday special, were the banter, the moments between the two of those characters, because they care about one another so much in their own broken and flawed ways. Of course, it's also a James Gunn film, so it can be very funny.
Analogy.
Is it?
Metaphor.
He's always a little bit hit or miss with his humor because he just kind of goes for it, but there's plenty of classic James Gunn laughs, lines, all of the stuff, wacky, weird characters, tons of personality and all the different things that you encounter. And it finds all the ways to get laughs at the right moments. But unlike, once again, compared to Volume 2, I didn't feel like this movie had tone issues. It balanced it better. And I didn't feel like every time it set up something really dark, it undercut it with a joke. It found a way to balance it much better than Volume 2 was able to. Another thing was a standout here. I think this one probably also has the best action of the James Gunn Guardian films, as opposed to the Guardian films from other people. Of the Guardians of the Galaxy films, this one I think has some of the best action sequences. In particular, there's a couple shots in the trailer of this hallway fight. It's a really cool fight sequence that uses like this wide angle lens because they're in this tight space and they're trying to show all this action, everything going on. And so it just looks interesting as the camera's flying around this room as each of our Guardians are just tearing up these beasts and these monsters. I think another reason why the action worked better in this movie for me is that because they're clear objectives, it just doesn't feel as much like kind of noise. Like you always know what we're trying to accomplish, and you always can feel that our characters are in danger. Enough things happen in this movie to make it clear no one's safe. That you feel the danger, you know the objective, and I think some of it's just shot better, choreographed better, and is done in a more interesting fashion. And the final big compliment that I can give this film is that it feels like the good old days of the MCU. A single voice. Doesn't feel like it was directed by committee. It feels like this is a James Gunn film. It has a heart. You feel real emotions. You care about the characters. The choices feel earned. And it has an edge to it. In a lot of ways, this might be the edgiest MCU film that we've ever gotten. It's the only MCU film that has an F word in it. Parents, be aware of that. There's one F word in this movie. It's probably the goriest film in the MCU, and so it has edge to it. It doesn't feel like they tried to soften everything to make it for the broadest possible audience. Even as I'm saying some of this, some of you might think maybe that movie's not for me, and that might be the case because it has a little bit of edge to it, and I would say that's a good thing. I mean, over the last couple of years, I've still had fun with the MCU, but it feels like some of the magic's been lost. It doesn't have that same heart. This movie reminded me of what it was like when we used to watch a new Marvel movie.
Someday, I'm gonna make great machines that fly. And me and my friends are gonna go flying together into the forever and beautiful sky.
I need to give it another watch to say definitively, but this is probably the best MCU film since Endgame. But there are still some issues here, so let's move on to the mixed aspects of the film. The big thing that comes to mind here is that this is potentially the darkest film in the entire MCU. Now, we all define dark differently. We're all bothered by different things. This movie contains a lot of cruelty to animals. A lot of that is what makes the movie so gut-wrenching, so heartbreaking, that sets up the stage for the stakes, how evil this villain is that you're watching this cruel, cruel character treat Rocket and his friends in a certain manner, and it's going to be too far for a lot of people. Like, I can imagine my wife hating this movie, not because she thinks it's bad, but because it's just, there's too much cruelty to animals in the film.
No, don't like that.
I also mentioned this before, it's probably the goriest film in the MCU. There's several different images that are just like, oh, that was messed up. Like, I really didn't know that you could show that in a PG-13 film. Ew. This is a very hard PG-13. Another thing here, this doesn't really comment on the quality of the film, but there was some deceptive stuff in the trailers.
What? No!
There's some lines that are in the trailers that were changed to make for a great moment in the trailer. They're not in the film. Final thing you have to talk about here, there's a mid-credit scene and a post-credit scene. Both of them are kind of follow-ups on where the movie ends. They're not like necessarily teases for where things are headed, though there is some indication of that at the very end, but they're just fun scenes that give us a little bit more of an epilogue to the film, essentially is what they are. From there, let's move on to the bad. First issue, Adam Warlock is a bit of another Taskmaster situation.
Bogus.
Not as offensive, not as egregious. Honestly, I'm not like an expert on Adam Warlock in the comics, and maybe he's just like this in the comics. In this film, he felt like a glorified henchman. It felt like James Gunn put in a post-credit scene on Volume 2, and that locked him into having to include him in this movie without him having like a truly pivotal role. He's used to progress the plot forward, but any number of other characters or things could have done in this movie what Adam Warlock does. Second thing, at its core, if you strip away specifics, there's quite a few similarities to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 in regards to the villain's plan. If you don't want to know anything about the movie at all, maybe skip forward 30 seconds. This isn't really spoilers because I'm very vague in what I'm saying, but the movie's about a villain who was responsible for something that makes one of our Guardians special, wanting to reacquire that person as part of their master plan to make the universe the way that they want it. That describes what Ego is doing, and that describes what's going on in this film. I think it's done much better here. It's a better version of that on all fronts, but it was definitely a little bit familiar. Third, the plot is driven by these forced bad choices. From beginning to end, as soon as something happens, a character goes, we need to go do this. And everyone goes, that's a bad idea for the following reasons. And somehow it just kind of works out and progresses the plot forward in a way that it probably shouldn't. And that's both on the Guardian side as well as the villain side. People keep making bad choices, they're warned against it, and it just happens to get us to the outcome that the plot demands. It would have been nice if there was better justification for the plot moving forward than, well, it was a good thing they made that bad choice because it got us somewhere correct. Finally, James Gunn really needs to stop casting his friends and family in his movies. There's a sequence in particular where the whole time you just keep noticing that's a person that is very close to James Gunn. And some of it's a little bit fun to see some of these people, but it pulls you out of the movie because it's reminding you you're watching a James Gunn project rather than being just absorbed into the film. At a certain point in time, it stops serving the movie and it's just about him doing something cute for his buddies. Real quick, before I give you my final thoughts, be sure to join me down below in the comments section. Let me know, what did you think about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3? Also, over the next couple of weeks, I'm gonna have a ton of James Gunn, Guardians, MCU content evaluating from every which way. I can't wait to do a spoiler review for this movie because there's so much to talk about. Once again, that'll come out once the film has released. In the end, my negatives didn't really hurt my experience watching the film that much. This is an emotion-filled, satisfying conclusion to the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. The movie captures the magic of what the MCU used to feel like. And I just had a blast with this film. James Gunn pulled it off. Overall, I'm gonna give this film an A- on the entertainment scale. It's a 9.5 out of 10, and you should see this film in the theaters. This is probably the best MCU film since Endgame, and it is a satisfying conclusion. It gave me everything that I wanted. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.